Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Enjoy the listening. They thought their poison was unbeatable until a human took a sip. Chief toxicologist V.X. Snowden squinted at the bubbling purple liquid through his protective visor, the gelatinous membrane of his third eyelid reflexively closing as a particularly vigorous bubble burst. Recording session 97, compound BZ-479, test series 12. He spoke into the lab recorder, his mandibles clicking with barely contained excitement. The laboratory of the Galactic Confederation's Advanced Weapons Research Division hummed with the swirling of centrifuges and the occasional beep of monitoring equipment. Rex's assistant, Telmator, hovered nearby, her bioluminescent spots pulsing with nervous energy. "Are you absolutely certain about the dosage calculations?" Pelna asked, her voice dropping to a whisper as if the deadly toxin might somehow hear them plotting. The last 3 test subjects experienced total molecular disintegration in under 8 seconds. Rax turned all 4 of his eyes toward her, the upper set narrowing in annoyance while the lower pair continued monitoring the solution. 8 seconds is unacceptable, Pelna. The High Command specified 10 to 12 seconds for maximum psychological impact on the battlefield. The victims need time to realize they're dying, but not enough time to do anything about it. He paused, adding with a chuckle, besides, the cleanup crew complained about having to scrape molecules off the ceiling again. "Your dark humor remains as charming as ever, Chief Snowden," Pelna remarked dryly, tapping her datapad. "Just remember, when the Ethics Committee inevitably investigates this project, I told you so." "The Ethics Committee?" VX scoffed, carefully adding 3 drops of glowing blue catalyst to the mixture. "Those tentacled bureaucrats wouldn't recognize necessary scientific progress if it crawled up their ventilation tubes and laid eggs." The solution hissed, changing from purple to a shimmering, almost hypnotically beautiful gold. "Perfect. That's the catalytic conversion we've been searching for." Commander Drees BTO chose that precise moment to enter the laboratory, his heavy exoskeleton clanking against the doorframe. Despite being the military liaison to the weapons division, he moved with remarkable grace for someone whose species evolved on a high-gravity planet. "Tell me you've made a breakthrough, Snowden." The Admiralty grows impatient. "See for yourself, Commander." VX gestured proudly toward the golden liquid. "The compound BZ-479, perfected at last. 1 drop in a water supply could eliminate every living thing in a small city. 3 drops could render an entire moon uninhabitable for generations." Bartok's facial ridges expanded with satisfaction. "Excellent. And the delivery system?" "Undetectable by any known scanning technology," Brax replied, carefully transferring a small amount to a clear container. "It mimics common beverages, adapts to match surrounding chemical compositions, and remains dormant until activated by specific enzymes present in most carbon-based life forms." "Most?" BTO questioned, his tone suddenly sharp. Brax waved a dismissive appendage. "A statistical certainty, Commander. We've tested it against tissue samples from 97% of known sentient species in the Confederation database. The reaction is universal and, I might add, spectacularly effective." "The Admiralty will be pleased," BTO nodded. "We're hosting a diplomatic reception for the newest species seeking admission to the Confederation tomorrow. Some primitive bipeds called humans, I believe. Perfect timing to demonstrate our technological superiority to potential allies." Pelna's spots flashed warning colors. "Surely you don't mean to actually deploy?" "Of course not," VX interrupted, carefully storing the sample in a secure container. "But having it nearby during negotiations never hurts. After all, the best weapon is one you never have to use, but everyone knows you could." As the security field hummed to life around the golden liquid, VX felt a surge of professional pride. His creation was perfect, elegant, efficient, and absolutely lethal. No species in the galaxy could possibly survive contact with compound BZ-479. Of that he was completely, uncheckably certain. How very wrong he was about to discover he was. The grand reception hall of the Confederation Diplomatic Corps gleamed under the light of 3 artificial suns, each carefully calibrated to accommodate the visual spectrums of different species. Frax Snowden stood uncomfortably near a refreshment station, tugging at his formal ceremonial carapace covers, which pinched in all the wrong places. "Stop fidgeting," Pelna whispered, her spots muted to a professional pale blue. You look like a molting adolescent at their first planetary alignment ceremony. I hate these diplomatic functions, VX grumbled, surreptitiously scanning the room for Commander Talk. Scientists belong in laboratories, not paraded around like exotic specimens for politicians to gawk at. Well, your perfect toxin is the reason we're required to attend, Pelna reminded him. And there's the specimen we're all here to observe. Across the hall, a delegation of 5 humans entered, escorted by Ambassador Quan Tex, whose translucent skin rippled with formal welcome patterns. Rax studied the newcomers with scientific curiosity. They appeared remarkably plain, bipedal, symmetrical, with only 2 eyes and no visible defensive adaptations. How such vulnerable-looking creatures had achieved spaceflight technology was genuinely puzzling. They're smaller than I expected, VX noted, observing as the humans were introduced to various Confederation representatives. And they keep their sensory organs so exposed, practically begging for predatory attention. One human in particular, a female with striking red head fur and green optical organs, seemed to be the leader. Her voice carried across the hall as she laughed at something Ambassador Tax said. That's Captain Madison Blackwood, Pelna informed him, scrolling through her datapad. Commander of their exploratory vessel and chief diplomatic representative. Commander Bartok appeared suddenly beside them, his exoskeleton freshly polished for the occasion. Nodin, you brought the sample, correct? For the military technology demonstration. Brax patted the secure container hidden within his formal wear. As ordered, though I still think bringing it to a diplomatic function is unnecessary risk. The High Command disagrees, Bartok replied curtly. Make sure it stays secure. As the commander moved away, servers began circulating with refreshments designed for each species' biochemistry. Brax accepted a glass of fermented nectar, while Pelna chose a carbonated mineral solution. They're headed this way, Pelna warned, her spots flickering with anxiety. Indeed, Ambassador Tex was leading the human delegation toward them. Ah, Chief Toxicologist Nodin, allow me to introduce Captain Blackwood and her team. Captain, this is the genius behind our latest defensive breakthrough. Rex extended his primary greeting appendage, which the human captain grasped without hesitation. Her hand felt alarmingly warm against his exoskeleton. Pleasure to meet you, Chief Nodin, Captain Blackwood said, her translator rendering her words perfectly. Your ambassador tells me you're responsible for some remarkable advances in biochemical protection. Protection? Yes, VX clicked his mandibles nervously. That's precisely what we develop. Protective measures. Behind them, disaster was unfolding. A server drone, programmed to match beverages to species, had malfunctioned. In a confusion, it had accessed VX's secured container during a routine scan for refreshment supplies. Now it approached with a tray of drinks, including one shimmering golden liquid in a glass labeled for human consumption. Ah, perfect timing, Ambassador Talix exclaimed, distributing the beverages, to toast to new friendships across the stars. Before VX could react, Captain Blackwood had accepted the glass containing compound BZ-479. Wait, don't, VX began, but it was too late. Captain Madison Blackwood raised the glass to her lips and took a generous sip of the deadliest poison in the known galaxy. Time seemed to slow to an excruciating crawl as Captain Madison Blackwood swallowed the golden liquid. VX's 4 eyes widened in horror, his exoskeleton nearly cracking from sudden tension. Compound BZ-479 slid down the human's throat with casual ease, as if it were nothing more dangerous than celebratory nectar. By the 7 moons of Prion, VX shrieked, his voice escalating to a pitch that shattered 2 nearby crystalline sculptures. All conversation in the hall ceased instantly. She just consumed compound BZ-479. Emergency protocols now. Pelna immediately activated her emergency medical beacon, her bioluminescent spots flashing urgent red distress patterns. Containment field. We need a biological containment field immediately, she screamed, backing away from the human. Pandemonium erupted. Diplomats from 17 different species scrambled toward exits. A Muon ambassador dove beneath a refreshment table, wrapping all 6 limbs protectively around his head. 2 security officers activated their personal shield generators, creating a barricade between themselves and the doomed human. Commander Bartok's exoskeleton emitted a high-pitched whine as his emergency systems engaged. Evacuate. Molecular disintegration imminent. He bellowed, shoving smaller diplomats aside as he charged toward the nearest decontamination chamber. Through it all, Captain Blackwood stood perfectly still, the empty glass still clutched in her hand, a puzzled expression crossing her features as she watched the chaotic scene unfold. "What's happening?" she asked, her translator struggling to be heard above the commotion. Ambassador Talix had collapsed into a gelatinous puddle of distress, a natural defensive reaction of his species. 8 seconds until complete molecular breakdown. He burbled miserably from the floor. Such a promising first contact ruined. RX, despite his terror, found himself rooted to the spot, his scientific mind automatically counting down. 3 seconds had passed. 4. Captain Blackwood remained irritatingly intact. The other humans from the delegation pushed through the panicking crowd to reach their captain. "Madison, what did you do?" demanded a tall male with facial hair. "Apparently," Captain Blackwood replied calmly, "I've caused some sort of diplomatic incident by drinking this." She examined the empty glass with curiosity. "Tasted a bit like spiced rum, actually. Not bad." 6 seconds. Brax found himself shouting, unable to look away from what should be the beginning of catastrophic cellular collapse. "Your internal organs should be liquefying." "I'm sorry," Captain Blackwood responded, looking more confused than concerned. "I feel perfectly fine." 7 seconds. 8 seconds. 9. Helena had taken cover behind an ornamental plant, but peered out cautiously. "Chief Noden, shouldn't she be? She made a graphic, explosive gesture with her appendages." 10 seconds. 11. 12. The hall had grown eerily quiet as the evacuation stalled, every being watching in morbid fascination, waiting for the human to disintegrate. 13 seconds. 14. Captain Blackwood cleared her throat in the silence. "Well, this is awkward. Should I be doing something specific right now? Perhaps spontaneously combusting?" She smirked at her own joke, then took another casual sip from a water glass a server had nervously provided. 15 seconds. "Impossible." Brax finally bellowed, all scientific decorum abandoned. "That was compound BZ-479, the most lethal toxin ever created. No living being can survive contact with it." Captain Blackwood shrugged, her lips quirking upward in a smile that would haunt BX nightmares for cycles to come. "Guess someone forgot to tell me that." The diplomatic reception hall had transformed into a makeshift medical observation chamber. Captain Madison Blackwood sat on an examination platform surrounded by a half-dozen alien medical specialists, each frantically waving different scanning devices at her as if she were some impossible physics anomaly. 30 minutes, muttered VX, pacing back and forth so rapidly his leg joints emitted a high-pitched whine. 30 minutes, and not so much as a sneeze. How is this possible? Dr. Lenzo Fox, the Confederation's leading xenobiologist, adjusted her sensory enhancers and peered at a holographic display of the human's internal systems. Fascinating. The compound appears to be moving through her digestive tract normally. There's no cellular degradation whatsoever. Perhaps, suggested another scientist, a hovering gas-based entity named Professor Quam. The delivery mechanism failed. The catalytic conversion might have been incomplete. Brack shook his head violently. "Impossible. I verified the conversion myself. That was weapons-grade BZ-479. It should have reduced her to constituent atoms by now." Madison Blackwood sighed dramatically and checked the timepiece on her wrist. "Not to interrupt this riveting discussion about my impending molecular disintegration, but is there any chance I could get something else to drink? That golden stuff left a weird aftertaste, kind of like licking a battery." The assembled alien scientists froze in unified horror. "You know what licking an electrical storage device tastes like?" Dr. Vox asked cautiously. Captain Blackwood shrugged. "Childhood curiosity. We've all done strange things as kids, right?" The xenobiologists exchanged troubled glances, clearly reconsidering everything they thought they knew about human development. Commander Bartok, who had been watching from a safe distance behind a reinforced barrier, finally approached. "This is clearly some kind of human deception. Perhaps they've developed an advanced antidote or preventative measure." Madison rolled her eyes so dramatically that several aliens instinctively backed away, thinking it might be the beginning of symptoms. "Yes, we developed an antidote for a poison we didn't know existed from a species we just met today. That makes perfect sense." Pelna, who had been analyzing tissue samples, suddenly gasped. "Chief Noden, the compound is being broken down. Her liver enzymes are. They're metabolizing the toxin like it's just another protein. That's not how chemistry works." Breck shrieked, his scientific worldview crumbling before his 4 eyes. Captain Blackwood patted his exoskeleton sympathetically. If it helps, we humans have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Though in this case, she added with a mischievous grin, it apparently doesn't even come close to killing me. The research laboratory aboard the Confederation flagship Indomitable Pursuit had never been so crowded. Normally, xenobiologists maintain strict protocols about research density. Too many bodies generating heat, shifting air currents, and emitting unpredictable electromagnetic fields could compromise delicate experiments. Today, those protocols have been unceremoniously jettisoned out the nearest airlock. Scientists from 7 specialties crowded around displays showing magnified views of human cellular activity. Captain Blackwood had generously provided tissue samples, much to the horror of her own medical officer, who kept muttering something about informed consent paperwork and ethical guidelines. Look at this, Dr. Vox exclaimed, her sensory appendages quivering with excitement. Their cellular repair mechanisms are responding to the toxin by adapting to it. Professor Quam expanded his gaseous form to get a better view. Impossible. The toxin specifically targets mitochondrial function. Nothing can adapt to complete energy production failure. Humans apparently didn't get that memo, Brack said, slumping into a chair designed for a completely different species anatomy. Look at the liver enzymes. They're not just neutralizing the compound, they're breaking it down for use. On the main display, magnified 1,000,000 times, human liver cells methodically disassembled the molecular structure of compound BZ479, harvesting components as if it were nothing more dangerous than a complex sugar. Helma, who had been cross-referencing the human medical database provided by Captain Blackwood, looked up in astonishment. Their evolutionary history explains everything. Their home planet is riddled with natural toxins, and they evolved consuming them. What do you mean, consuming them? Demanded Commander Bartok, who had insisted on overseeing the research. Thelma's spots pulsed with academic excitement. Plants on their planet produce compounds specifically designed to kill predators, but humans learn to process them. Look at this list. Caffeine, capsaicin, and theobromine. All plant defense toxins that humans not only tolerate but seek out for pleasure. That makes no evolutionary sense, protested Dr. Vox. Why waste energy developing tolerance to poisons? Because, came Captain Blackwood's voice from the doorway where she leaned casually, arms crossed. What doesn't work as a food source today might be essential for survival tomorrow. The room fell silent as Madison strolled in, perfectly healthy despite having consumed enough toxin to kill a small moon's population. You know what's really interesting? She continued, examining the displays of her own cellular activity. Throughout our history, humans have deliberately consumed small amounts of toxins to build immunity. We call it Mithridatism. Some of our ancient rulers were so paranoid about assassination they regularly consumed poisons to become immune. Rax's mandibles clicked in horrified fascination. You willingly poison yourselves as a safety precaution. Madison grinned. Sometimes for fun, too. You should see what we drink on Saturday nights. Commander Dres Bartok slammed his armored appendage against the secure conference table, causing the holographic displays to flicker. This changes everything about our strategic position, he growled, addressing the emergency session of the Confederation Defense Council. A species immune to our most potent biochemical weapons represents an unprecedented threat. High Admiral Krez Sur, whose ancient carapace bore the scars of 17 interstellar conflicts, leaned forward on all 6 support limbs. Let us not overreact, Commander. 1 human survived 1 toxin. This hardly constitutes a planetary defense crisis. With all due respect, Admiral BTO countered, bringing up footage of Captain Blackwood casually sipping water in the research lab. Our intelligence now confirms this wasn't a fluke. The human biochemistry is fundamentally adaptive. They evolved on a death world so saturated with natural poisons that their physiology developed extraordinary countermeasures. Far across the table, Strategic Director Melver Quintex, whose crystalline body refracted light in patterns indicating deep concern, spoke. The implications extend beyond toxins. Their medical database reveals tolerance for radiation levels that would sterilize most Confederation species. They can survive temperature variations that would shatter my physical form. Some even deliberately expose themselves to solar radiation for aesthetic purposes. Aesthetic purposes? Sunbathing, supplied VX Noden, who had been summoned to provide scientific context. They call it sunbathing, And yes, they willingly absorb cancer-causing radiation to alter their external coloration. A murmur of horror rippled through the assembled military leaders. "We must accelerate weapons development immediately," Bartok insisted. "Begin testing with thermal extremes, gravity manipulation, and sonic disruption. Every human weakness must be cataloged and exploited before they realize their advantage." Peltner, who had not been invited but had accompanied VX as his research assistant, couldn't remain silent any longer. "The humans came seeking peaceful admission to the Confederation. They haven't shown any aggressive intent whatsoever yet." "Yet," BTO hissed, "his combat ridge is flaring. They haven't shown aggressive intent yet, but history proves that every species eventually uses its evolutionary advantages to dominate. Can we afford to wait until they realize we can't poison them? Until they weaponize their own unique biochemistry against us?" Admiral Zor raised a scared limb for silence. "Director Quintus, what do our psychological profilers indicate about human temperament?" The crystalline being shifted, producing a sound like wind chimes. "Contradictory data, Admiral. They display both remarkable cooperation and extreme aggression, often simultaneously. Their historical records document ceaseless conflict between their own subgroups, yet extraordinary,